Hey there, you beautiful souls out there watching. Grab a cozy blanket, maybe a cup of coffee, because tonight, I'm taking you on a journey that's going to tug at your heartstrings, make your blood boil, and maybe even leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about love. This isn't just a story, it's my story, raw and unfiltered, laid bare for you to feel every pulse of it. I'm not here to sugarcoat anything. Life doesn't come with a filter, and neither does this tale. I was 28 when it all began, standing at the edge of what I thought was my forever. My name's Lena, not the kind of name that screams glamour or destiny. Just a regular girl with dreams bigger than her paycheck. I grew up in a small town, the kind where everybody knows your business before you do. My mum worked double shifts at the diner, and my dad, well, he was more of a memory than a presence. I learned early that if you want something, you've got to claw your way to it. And I wanted love, not the fleeting, summer fling kind, but the bone deep, I'd die for you kind. Sounds dramatic, right? That when you grow up with nothing, love feels like the one thing that might fill the cracks. So there I was, fresh out of community college with a degree that barely got me a job as a receptionist at a dental office. It wasn't glamorous typing appointments, smiling at grumpy patients, and dodging my boss's coffee breath that it paid the bills. Daily, I lived in a one-bedroom apartment with peeling paint and a radiator that groaned like it was auditioning for a horror movie. But I was okay with it. I had a plan: work hard, save up, maybe one day open my own little bakery. I'd always loved baking. Kneading dough felt like therapy, and the smell of fresh bread was my kind of perfume. Then I met him, Ethan. God, even saying his name now feels like swallowing glass. I was at a friend's birthday party, one of those crowded, sweaty gatherings where you're half shouting to be heard over bad pop music. I was in the corner, nursing a lukewarm beer, when he walked in, tall, with this effortless charm that made the room tilt toward him. Dark hair that fell just right, and eyes that seemed to see straight through you. He wasn't loud or flashy, but he didn't need to be. People gravitated to him like he was the sun. We got to talking, nothing profound, just small stuff. He asked about my job, laughed when I told him about the time I accidentally scheduled to patients for the same slot and had to play diplomat in the waiting room. I asked about him, and he was vague in that mysterious way that makes you want to know more. He worked in finance, he said. Something about investments. I didn't understand half of it, but I didn't care. His voice was warm, like a fireplace on a winter night, and for the first time in forever, I felt seen. That night turned into coffee dates, then dinners, then weekends tangled up in each other's lives. Ethan wasn't like anyone I'd ever met. He was polished, confident, the kind of guy who knew which fork to use at a fancy restaurant. He'd grown up in a world so different from Manette schools, summer houses, parents who didn't just have money, old money, the kind that comes with expectations and invisible walls. But when we were together, none of that mattered. He'd hold my hand under the table, whisper silly jokes in my ear, and make me feel like I was enough. 6 months in, I was all in, head over heels, heart on my sleeve. Can't breathe without you in love. I'd never felt anything like it. Ethan was my safe place, my adventure, my everything. I started dreaming bigger, not just for me, but for us. I'd stay up late, scribbling ideas in a notebook. A little house with a garden, maybe a dog, holidays where we'd actually go somewhere instead of binge-watching shows on my cracked laptop. I wanted to build something with him, something real. But love, oh, it's a tricky beast. It makes you blind to the cracks forming under your feet. I started noticing things small at first, like how he'd tense up when I suggested meeting his parents. They're complicated, he'd say, brushing it off with a smile. Or how he'd change the subject when I talked about my dreams, like they were cute but not serious. I told myself it was nothing, just quirks. Everyone's got them, right? Then came the day I decided to surprise him. I'd been saving up for weeks, skipping lunches to afford a bottle of that fancy whiskey he liked. I showed up at his apartment, grinning like an idiot, only to find him on the phone, pacing. He didn't see me at first, and I caught a snippet of his conversation. "She's sweet. But come on. She's not exactly our kind of people." My stomach dropped. I wanted to believe I'd misheard, but the way he laughed sharp, dismissive at me to the bone. I slipped out before he noticed me, the whiskey bottle heavy in my bag. I didn't confront him, not then. I went home, sat on my creaky couch, and replayed every moment we'd shared. Was I imagining it? Was I just some fling to him? A detour from his real life? I wanted answers, but I was terrified of what they'd be. So I did what I always did when things got hard. I worked. I picked up extra shifts, stayed late, anything to keep my mind off the ache in my chest. But Ethan noticed. He'd text, call, sharp with flowers, acting like nothing was wrong. And I let him, because love makes you stupid, because I thought I could fix it. Months passed, and I threw myself into proving I was enough. I worked harder, longer, taking on side gigs to afford nicer clothes, better gifts for him. I wanted to be someone he'd be proud of, someone who could stand next to him and not feel like an outsider. I'd wake up at 5 a.m., drag myself through 12-hour days, then come home and bake late into the night, perfecting recipes I hoped he'd love. I was exhausted, but I told myself it was worth it. For him, for us. One night, after a particularly brutal day, I was at his place, curled up on his couch. He'd been distant all evening, scrolling his phone while I rambled about a new dessert idea. I reached for his hand, desperate for a connection, and he pulled away. Not sharply, but enough to make me freeze. "Lena," he said, his voice flat. "We need to talk." My heart stopped. You know that moment when the world slows down, and you can hear your own pulse? That was it. He looked at me, his eyes cold in a way I'd never seen. "You're amazing," he started, and I knew it was a lie before he even finished. "But my family, they have expectations, a certain kind of life, and yeah, you're just not qualified for that." Not qualified. Like I was applying for a job and failed the interview. I sat there, numb, as he explained how his parents wanted him to settle down with someone from their world, someone who fit their mold, someone who wasn't me. I don't remember what I said, probably nothing coherent. I just grabbed my bag and left, the city lights blurring through tears I refused to let fall. I walked for hours, replaying every sacrifice, every moment I'd poured into him. I'd worked myself to the bone, given him everything, and still, I wasn't enough. Not for his family, not for him. When I got home, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat in the dark, staring at the walls, wondering how love could feel so right and then so wrong. I thought about my mum, working those endless shifts, never complaining because she had no choice. I thought about every time I pushed through exhaustion, telling myself it was for something bigger. And I realized he'd been fighting for a dream that was never mine. The days after that night were a blur, like I was moving through fog. I'd wake up, go to work, smile at patients, and pretend my world hadn't cracked open. But inside, I was unraveling. Every time my phone buzzed, I'd flinch, half hoping it was Ethan, half dreading it. He didn't call, not once. That silent sight was louder than any words he could have said. It screamed that I'd been disposable, a chapter he'd closed without a second thought. I kept replaying his words, not qualified. They burned into me, like a brand I couldn't scrub off. I'd look in the mirror and wonder what exactly I was missing. Was it the way I talked? The clothes I wore? The fact that my bank account didn't have enough zeros? I'd always known Ethan's world was different: marble countertops, vacations in places I couldn't pronounce, but I thought love was supposed to bridge that gap. I thought we were supposed to bridge it. Work became my lifeline. I'd throw myself into it, staying late, taking on tasks nobody else wanted. My boss noticed, started giving me more responsibility. It wasn't much, just ordering supplies, training a new hire, but it felt good to be needed somewhere. At night, though, when the world went quiet, the ache came back. I'd sit on my couch, the same one I'd curled up on with Ethan, and feel like a stranger in my own life. I stopped baking. That hurt the most. Baking had always been my escape, my way of turning chaos into something warm and sweet. But every time I reached for flour or sugar, I'd see Ethan's face, hear his voice dismissing my dreams. So I let it go. I let a piece of myself go. My apartment started to feel like a museum of who I used to be, tea mixing bowls, recipe cards gathering dust. Then came the call. My mom, her voice thin and tired over the phone. She'd fallen at work, twisted her ankle bad enough to need a week off. No sick pay, of course. She didn't ask for help, she never did, but I could hear the whirring in her pulse. I didn't think twice. I took on more hours, picked up a weekend job at a coffee shop. 12-hour days turned into 14, sometimes 16. I'd stumble home, my feet screaming, my head pounding, and collapse into bed only to do it all again. I told myself it was temporary, just until Mom was back on her feet. But deep down, I knew I was running from the emptiness, from the truth that I'd built my life around someone who didn't want me. Work was the only thing that made sense. It was numbers, tasks, results. No feelings, no betrayal. Just do the job, get the paycheck, keep moving. One night, I was wiping down tables at the coffee shop, the kind of bone-tired where your eyes burn and your legs feel like lead. A customer lingered, an older woman with kind eyes and a scarf knotted just so. She watched me for a bit, then said, "You're carrying a heavy load, aren't you?" I laughed it off. Customers say weird stuff sometimes, but she didn't let it go. "I've seen that look," she said. "Like you're holding up the world and nobody's noticing." I don't know why, but I started talking. Not everything, just pieces. How I'd been working non-stop, how I was trying to help my mom, how I felt like I was drowning but couldn't stop swimming. She listened, really listened, the way people rarely do. When I finished, she reached across the table, squeezed my hand and said, "You're stronger than you know, but don't let the world steal your spark." Her words stuck with me, like a song I couldn't shake. I started thinking about what I'd lost, not just Ethan, but me, the girl who used to laugh too loud, who'd dance in her kitchen to cheesy pop songs, who believed she could build something beautiful. Where had she gone? I didn't know, but I wanted her back. Slowly, I started to rebuild. I cut back on the coffee shop shifts, not much, just enough to breathe. I called my mum more, not just to check on her but to hear her stories, her laugh. I even picked up my mixing bowls again. The first batch of cookies was a disaster, burnt edges, too much salt, but I ate them anyway, laughing at myself for the first time in months. Then I got the invitation. A friend from college, Mia, was throwing a gallery opening for her paintings. I almost didn't cockroach. Small talk, the risk of seeing someone from Ethan's world. But Mia insisted, and I couldn't say no to her. So I went, wearing a dress I'd bought on sale, my heart hammering as I stepped into the bright, nosy space. It was overwhelming at first, people chattering, glasses clinking, part I didn't quite understand. But Mia pulled me into her orbit, introducing me to her friends, artists and dreamers who talked like the world was theirs to shape. For the first time in forever, I felt a flicker of something, hope, maybe, or possibility. I wasn't invisible here. I wasn't not qualified. As the night wore on, I found myself in a quiet corner, sipping wine and watching the crowd. That's when I saw him. Not Ethan, thank God, but a guy with a crooked smile and paint-splattered jeans. He caught my eye, grinned, and wandered over. "You look like you're analyzing a room," he said, his voice light but curious. We talked, not about anything big, just the art, the music, the way Mia's laugh could fill a room. His name was Sam, and he was a sculptor, the kind of person who saw beauty in broken things. He didn't ask about my job or my past, and I didn't volunteer it. For those few minutes, I wasn't the girl who'd been left behind. I was just Lena, standing in a gallery, feeling alive. When I got home that night, I didn't overthink it. I didn't dissect every word or wonder what Sam thought of me. I just sat by my window, the city humming outside, and let myself feel the shift. Something was changing, not just in my life, but in me. I wasn't whole yet. Not even close. But I was starting to remember who I was. The gallery night lingered in me like a melody you hum without realizing. I woke up the next morning with this strange lightness, like I'd shed a layer of something heavy. It wasn't happiness not yet, but it was close. A spark, maybe, like that woman at the coffee shop had said. I held on to it, fragile as it was, because I knew how easily it could slip away. Work was still a grind, but I started finding small ways to make it mine. I'd bring cookies for the dental office staff, sneaking smiles from even the grumpiest hygienists. I'd chat with patients, not just about their appointments but about their lives, their kids, their vacations, their little joys. It wasn't much, but it made the days feel less like a treadmill. I was still pulling long hours, still sending money to Mom. But I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was searching for what? I wasn't sure. But I could feel it out there. Waiting. Sam texted a few days after the gallery. Nothing fancy, just a photo of a lopsided clay mug he'd made, captioned, "Disaster or Masterpiece." I laughed out loud, startling my neighbor's cat on the fire escape. We started texting more silly stuff at first, then deeper. He'd tell me about his art, how he'd spend hours shaping something only to smash it and start over. I told him about baking, how it felt like alchemy to turn flour and sugar into comfort. We didn't talk about Ethan or the past, and I was grateful for that. Sam didn't need to know the broken parts of Menet yet. One evening, he invited me to his studio. I almost said new old habits, old fears, but I pushed through. The studio was a mess, all clay dust and half-finished sculptures, but it was alive in a way that made my heart hum. Sam showed me how to work the wheel, his hands steady as he guided mine. I was terrible at it, my mug collapsing into a sad lump, but we laughed until my sides hurt. For the first time in months, I wasn't trying to prove anything. I was just there, in the moment, covered in clay and feeling free. Life kept moving, as it does. Mum's ankle healed, and she went back to the diner, stubborn as ever. I cut back to one job, keeping the dental office because it was steady and, honestly, I liked the people. I started baking again, not just for myself but for others, neighbors, co-workers, even strangers at the park. I'd leave little boxes of scones or brownies with notes that said, "Hope this makes your day sweeter." It was my way of putting something good into the world, of reclaiming what I'd lost. Then came the letter. It was slipped under my door, no stamp, just my name in sharp, familiar handwriting. Ethan. My hands shook as I opened it, half expecting an apology, half dreading one. It wasn't either. It was an invitation to his engagement party. Engagement party. The words hit like a slap. He was marrying someone else, from his world, no doubt. Someone qualified. I sat there, the letter crumpled in my lap, and waited for the pain to swallow me. But it didn't. Not the way I expected. I was angry, sure, furious at him, at myself, at the unfairness of it all. But under there was something else. Relief, because I didn't want him anymore. I didn't want his world, his rules, his love that came with conditions. I'd spent so long trying to fit into his life, I'd forgotten how to live my own. I didn't go to the party. I didn't need to. Instead, I went to the park with a batch of lemon tarts and gave them away to anyone who smiled at me. I watched kids chase pigeons, old couples shuffle hand in hand, and I felt this quiet strength settle in my bones. I wasn't just surviving Ethan's rejection, he was thriving past it. Sam and I kept seeing each other, not as a couple, not yet, but as something real. He'd show up with coffee and stories, and I'd bake him lopsided cakes that he swore were perfect. We'd talk about dreams, not the kind you pin on someone else, but the kind you build yourself. I started saving again, not for a house or a ring, but for that bakery I'd always wanted. It was a long shot, but it was mine. One night, I was closing up at the dental office, the sky outside bruised with dust. I step onto the street, my breath fogging in the cold, and saw my reflection in a shop window. I looked different, not older, not wiser, just more me than I'd ever been. I thought about Ethan, about his words, his world, and I realized something hadn't broken me. He'd cracked me open, and what came out was stronger, fiercer, alive. Love, I've learned, isn't about fitting someone else's mold. It's about finding the courage to be your own masterpiece, flaws and all. I'm not there yet fully, but I'm closer than I've ever been. And that's enough for now. So here I am, talking to you, sharing this piece of my soul. Maybe you've been where I was. Maybe you're there now. Maybe you're wondering if you're enough. Let me tell you you are. You're more than enough. And the world, it's waiting for you to claim it. Thank you for listening, for being here. I'll see you soon, with more stories, more heart. Until then, keep shining. You've got this.